Good afternoon, podcast community. We have a special storyteller in the house. Really going to have, I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. And when I was thinking about which podcast would a good storyteller be on, and I thought, you know what? The brain loves stories. So we switched to the Brain podcast because we have somebody that you're always going to want to know about how stories in this crowded digital, what do you call it? A lot of information that if you're not a good storyteller, nobody's going to remember you. So, Bill, I appreciate you being on. Tell our audience who you are, what you do, and who you serve.
Well, Pete, a pleasure to be here with you. Bill Blankschaen. I'm a storyteller, like you said, and it took decades actually for me to be at peace with that and figure out who I was.
Yes.
But over the course of time, really built an entire team around storytelling, and we call our company Story Builders, because that's what we do. We build stories, right? So we work with people to create compelling books, engaging learning experiences, trainings, workshops, and anything related to books, workshops. Basically, how do you turn ideas into greater impact, influence, and income is the business that we're in. So helping tell your story well is what we do. So we love serving people and telling stories that make the world a better place.
Well, you know what? You're like warming my heart when you say that, because it's funny. You said that like that. I think I evolved into that too.
Yeah.
And everything I remember about people was their story. And it was kind of like, is there a common thread here? And it was like one of these moments in the morning, it just like hit me a few years back. And I went, dang, it's all about the story.
Yeah.
And so if you're a good storyteller, I heard this stat. I don't know if it's exactly true, but I'd love you to comment on it.
Sure.
We hear 60,000 marketing messages a day.
Mm-hmm.
So how does a person get through that kind of clutter?
Yeah.
What would you tell a person that you hear that and you're in the business?
Right. Sure. Well, a couple thoughts on that. First of all, storytelling is both a science and an art. And I think a lot of people immediately go to the art, right? And they're like, well, I'll just wait till the muse strikes me and magic will happen. and they lose the fact that, no, actually over the thousands of years of human history that we have recorded, there are principles of good storytelling, right? There's a structure to that. We call it our storytelling structure. So we use that framework all the time when we're creating content as a starting point, right? So we're not boxed in by that, but it's a starting point for everything that we create. And that kind of positions us for whatever story we're telling to tell it well. But the second part of that, I think what really causes people to pay attention is when they hear a story that connects with their experience in some way, right? So this is what I found. People undervalue the power of their own story. And so they think no one wants to hear my story and so forth. But in fact, there are a lot of people out there who think the same thing. And then when they hear your story, like Pete, when they hear your story and they're like, oh, well, that happened to me too. I thought I was the only one. I want to listen to what Pete's saying because now it connects with me, right? So I think leaning into what makes your story unique is part of what resonates with people, right? Too often we try to be everything to everybody. And in doing so, we don't resonate with anybody.
Yep.
Right. But just leaning into that, I think, is one of the things that can separate people these days.
Yeah. I love that comment about, we all think, and I've heard it, if I've heard it once, I've heard it 100 times. The person will comment and it's like they've been that person for decades. So they're tired of themselves, maybe that would be. And so when I hear a story and I'm just fascinated by that the way that came, how they told it, they're going like, well, that's just who I've been. It's kind of a casual answer. And I'm going, no, it's your unique story. And it just moves people because you're right about the emotion. If it catches you where you can connect emotionally with a story that and I want to just share, because our viewers know this person. She's on our Mindset podcast. And I live in a senior living facility. 3 separate ladies came back from the community center, told the same story about this lady. I mean, it was like the same story. And it was like, I went, I want to meet this. They all said, you got to have this person on your podcast. Sure enough, that her story of transition in her mom, who was sedentary, into an active lifestyle, who's just excited about bringing people to her gym. And it was just an incredible story, but it was 3 separate people that told the same story. So it does have to hit, because I'm seeing people in our community that if you don't take care of your body, hey, you know, you only get one.
Sure.
It's not like you can say, trade me in, give me another one. What would you say? Like, I like how you said framework. So when you're storytelling with your clients, you know, obviously we're on a podcast, so there's an element to that. Where do you see it working in other things in their brand? Like, you know, how they write, how they, you know, just give our viewers an idea that it's just not podcasting.
Oh, sure. Absolutely not. Well, it applies to everything. We could talk for hours about this, but obviously it applies to book creation. We do book creation all the time. And the structure we use, we follow that structure both to set up the framework for the book, the skeleton of the book, but then each individual chapter and each individual content. But then it applies all the way down to if you have a blog and you're putting together a blog post or a social media post or anything along that line, and all the way over to what we call your brand story, like figuring out what is the story of my brand that I'm telling the world? What is that message? And we developed dynamic brand stories as well, following that same structure. And what that does is it allows people maybe who are building something like a podcast or, you know, a brand or anything, it allows them to not have to reinvent the wheel every time they tell the story, right? So now they're telling the story consistently. And what you just said, 3 people came to you with the same story. Well, that means somebody probably got good at telling that story well, which is why it stuck, right?
Yes.
The same story is coming to you, right? So it makes it sticky, right? And we do this ourselves, where I found myself for years ago, like trying to reimagine, like, who are we again? How do I talk about that? And then we created the brand story, and we've used it on for just so many people since then, so that they have clarity on that. Because often what holds people back is they're not clear on their own story that they want to tell the world. And so they don't tell it because they're just uncertain, or they tell it in bits and pieces and it doesn't resonate. You know, so we help people get clarity on that. But all of that, it applies everywhere, right? Anywhere that you're talking about what you're passionate about, what you're trying to do, whether you have a business or you don't have a business, or you have a cause that you care about, or, you know, like you just said, the story of this woman with getting her mother into a more active lifestyle, right? She had to tell her mother a story, right? She had to work through that same process and cast a story to her. And then the mother bought into the story, because it's a powerful thing that happens. We all tell ourselves stories internally, right? In our own heart and mind, we're telling ourselves stories all the time. And that just kind of points out how stories just fuels the world, fuels what we do every day.
Yeah. How do you feel when you initially work with a client, and so you're giving them the framing of what you guys do? What's the reaction when the light bulb goes off? I mean, what do they say to you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it varies quite a bit, right? Often it's a great sigh of relief when we call them story partners, by the way, because we kind of frame it as these are the people that we're partnering with to tell their story. When we talk with our story partners, there's a great sense of relief of, finally I can bring some order to this. Because a lot of people we work with, even to create books, they've got all kinds of ideas up here, but they're really busy, or they're not writers, and so the project that could do a lot of good in the world just gets pushed to the side or set on the shelf or whatever. And then they wake up a decade later and they're like, I still haven't touched that thing. I keep telling myself I will, and it seems fuzzy. And when people come work with us, when we show them the structure, this is how we build this out. We help them understand we're not putting them in a box by doing this. This is the framework, the science behind it. Now we can be creative and be artistic about it and bring it to life. There's a great sense of relief, a sense of empowerment. I can finally see how this could come to life and get out in the world and help a lot of people. And you know, working with people, I'm worked with one gentleman. I've written a New York Times bestselling book with him. We're just wrapping up another one now. It's the same process where we have the structure, and even someone functioning at that level still has the same challenges of, I need to bring order to this. I have lots of ideas. I have lots of other stuff going on. How do I pull it all together? All the way down to, one of the books we created with a young lady who had a heart condition. She had 4 open heart surgeries by the time we met her. And she was telling somewhat of a memoir of her and her twin sister. And it's a really touching story. She's now had a 5th. I think she has like the record or something for most surgeries of people with her condition. Mm-hmm. Not a record you really want, but she's still with us, right? So it's a crazy story that people who have wrestled with similar things they're going to connect with that, right? And they're going to resonate with that, and they're going to love that. So all across the scope of the projects, there's no project too big, no project too small. It's about what is that passion within you. And then when people see, there's actually a playbook I can use and work with people to help me bring this to life, to the world, then there's just a lot of relief and excitement that goes with that.
Yeah, that's I say exactly ditto to that, because we're bombarded with information from everywhere, like we said about the marketing messages, but it's not just that. It's just our brains were not intended for the information overload that's now upon us. So when you say the simplicity of a story, you're really giving the person receiving that information a comfort zone to the emotional connection. So it's almost so, and Hollywood's been telling stories for however many years they've been out there. And we go to a movie, we connect with it because of the story. Right. Disney's been a great storyteller for 100 years, whatever it is. And yet we sometimes get away from it in business, and we try to be all things, and we try to do this little tactic, this little thing. And you're right when you say, once you get your story and the framework of it, there's a big relief. I don't have to know all this. I don't have to do this and this. And I just have to be a good storyteller. Right. That is a sense of relief. What do you say? I love that. When you, at the beginning, you were talking about you were on this journey, and then you then put yourself in the business of being a storyteller builder. Sure. How long ago was that, and what was that process or that transition like?
Yeah, well, I'll give you the condensed version here. When I was a young boy, teenage boy, even, I loved to read, and I love stories. I mean, this is who I was. I just realized this the other day. My very first job was as a newspaper carrier. Right? What was I doing? I was carrying words to house, right? It was, and I would read every newspaper every day, right? It would just suck it up. So I always had this passion for this. I majored in English and history in college, thinking I want to tell stories and write them well and all that. I always thought of myself as a writer, and then life happened. Right? I met a wonderful woman, got married, began to have kids. I had been in retail for many years, and I helped start a private school up in Ohio, and led that for a dozen years. And it was one of those, Stephen Pressfield calls it a shadow calling. It's like it's close, but not quite. Right? And so I was teaching other people how to do that, developing curriculum and writing and all these kind of things. And then I finally concluded, after wrestling for about almost a year, trying to do both, keep one foot in both camps, and concluded somebody else is called and equipped to run this school better than I can. If I'm called to do this other thing and be a storyteller, then I need to step out and pursue that, because no one else can do that for me. Right. So stepped out and did that, left the school, 6 kids, no income for a year, out into the unknown. And that was back in 2012, I think, right? In that 2011, something like that. So for the last 12 plus years, this has been my focus. And when I stepped out of that, no income, 6 kids, I never worked harder in my life. I mean, it was the longest hours, but I loved it. I enjoyed every minute. I didn't even get paid for it. Right? I was working. And in fact, one of the keys to success in that has been the things that I did for free, the things that I jumped in and, hey, I'm just going to serve you on this project. I care about this project. Let me help you with this. And from that, so many other good things have come and opportunities have come. So it's kind of this, as I mentioned, it's almost this evolution, right? I kind of backed into it in that way. And I think a lot of people are like that in whatever it is they're doing in life, that maybe they have a sense when they're younger that they know what they should do, or they feel called a certain direction or have a passion for something. And then life just kind of gets in the way, and maybe they circle back later. And so anything that I can do to help someone find that earlier, right, and devote more of that time to that, I think is a good thing. But that's the condensed version of how it unfolded.
No, I mean, I love every aspect of it, because it's amazing when you see similarities but differences.
Sure.
Because I grew up dyslexic. So writing, I flunked English in high school. Yep. So I was picking up range balls when my friends were graduating. And it was I just, back then, they didn't even know how to spell the word. But it just didn't click. So I never wrote. And I journaled at times, but it looked like shorthand, because not being able to spell words. Then Alexa comes about. I go to a school. She teaches me how to do audio to text, and it kind of starts opening up a world. Then my partner said, "Pete, you had a podcast because you love talking." And now it's, fast forward a couple of years, I'm actually so much better at writing because my thoughts are clear. I journal 3 and 4 pages a day.
Right.
Start off the day. And I would have never done that 5-10 years ago, because I couldn't spell more than 2 words in a row. Right. So I would be like, back off from it.
Yeah.
So what do you, I want to get back to what you said about, that transit, the transition of really understanding your secret sauce or your talent. And in there, what was that year like? You got 6 kids, you got very little income coming in or anything.
Sure.
How did that help you to really, because when you were in that situation, I call it the immigrant personality. The immigrant mindset, because I know people come over here, they have nothing.
Sure.
They have no safety net. They have to make it work, and they make it work. How did that affect you? Like, got mouths to feed, you got a family to feed. I'm sure your wife's going, Bill, let's get some things going.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, she was incredibly supportive. Could not have made the journey without her, and the kids. And a big part of that was our faith story as well. Our faith was really, our faith in God, really at the heart of all that. And so we leaned into that heavily, especially during that time. I don't know how we would have navigated it without it, quite honestly. But so as we did that, though, I think what it did a couple of things. It really caused me to focus, right? It caused me to really get clear. And even as that year progressed, I got sharper and sharper and clearer, and really began to make connections, networking, meeting people, again, just serving. How can I help you? How can I be of service to you? And so often that is the key to not only finding the unique value that you have to give to the world, but other people becoming aware of the unique value you have to give to the world, right? And so that happened often. And during that time, I actually got a book deal that was based on this journey we were taking. And as we developed through that and came out of that, I wrote that book, and I realized I'm actually really good at this. And then I began to meet other people who said, hey, I could use help with my book. And here we are 14 years later, written countless books and all kinds of things. So I think part of it is that it kind of forces you to get serious. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that for most people.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Step away into the unknown.
I tell people all the time, your story's unique and you made it work. Sure. You don't say, here's the playbook for you to do it, because everybody's different.
Everybody is. And I actually recommend, if you can, making more of a transition into that. Yes. But eventually, I don't care who you are, what you do, if you're starting something new, you reach a point that's almost like a tipping point where you're like, hey, you're either in or you're out, right? You can try it out for a little while, but a lot of things will move you to that place. Erwin McManus has written a great book called Mind Shift. And one of the books, one of the principles he talks about in there is to be average at just about everything. And what he means by that is don't try to be the expert at everything. It's okay to be average at just about everything. Just find that one thing that you want to be excellent at, and
Yes.
don't be average there. It's okay everywhere else, but not there, right? And that's the key, I think. And I think for people to understand is the journey. Often we think that, hey, I need, by tomorrow, I need to know what my destination, I need to have clarity, I need to have this. But the reality is, as you move forward, your perspective shifts and change, and you see things you didn't see before, and you learn things, and you grow, and you come through that process. And, if you would have told me 12 years ago, this is where you're headed in 12 years, I would have said, I don't even understand that. What is that? Right. But, one of the things I read every morning is that good things come when I keep moving forward by faith. Right.
Yes.
I don't see everything where I'm supposed to go, but I'm going to keep moving forward with my hands and heart open and see where it takes me.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I'm a believer, so I understand the faith part of the equation, that
Sure.
we don't always see what's tomorrow
Sure.
brings, but we just keep moving forward. And if you're doing, like you said, serving,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people don't understand totally how that really works in business. And so they're looking to take, we call
Sure.
them the sharks or the takers. So
Sure.
they go into every situation like, what can I grab? What can I take?
Right.
Instead of how can I serve?
Sure.
What can I do? And it's obviously totally different.
Sure.
So what would you say, like, I love the idea of that transition, and mirror, kind of combine that with faith. So you're talking to my viewers, they're working a full time. It's not what exactly they think they want to do, but they realize they want to do something else, but you always got to keep the main income coming in, especially if you have 6 kids. I mean, that's a lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah.
How would you talk to those type of people that need to combine those two, and how that would look for our viewers?
Right. Well, and especially, I think the person you're talking about is someone who maybe they're in a job, safe, secure job with benefits, but they just have this stirring within and feel like this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. Maybe some of it is, some of it isn't. I don't know. I think the first thing you have to do is get clear on your passions, get clear on your purpose, get clear on the unique value that you really want to bring to the world. And the key is that you want to bring to the world, not what somebody else wants, or, try to fit in somebody else's box. What does that look like for you? What are you passionate about? And then once you get clear on that, and I think most of us know what that is, at least, at the core, as a kernel, maybe we don't have the full plant bloomed and so forth, but give yourself the room to let that grow within you. Right. So maybe you begin, like I did, begin doing that on the side, begin like almost a side hustle kind of thing, or a gig, just or as a hobby, start playing with it, see what that looks like, start researching what's out there. You have to give yourself permission to pursue this. And that's where I think the mental block comes for a lot of people, is they don't want to give themselves permission because they're afraid of what might come next. They're afraid.
Yes.
But, if God created each of us with unique talents and skills and so forth, and he put us here for a purpose, and we're not serving his purpose well, we're not serving the rest of the world well if we just stifle that and don't fully develop it and lean into it and figure out what that is, because we're afraid it might not work out. We're afraid what people think. I guarantee whoever you are 100 years from now, no one's going, it won't matter. Right. And so leaning into that, then I think, get clear on that. And if you can, prepare yourself for that financially and otherwise, to give yourself some margin to be able to pursue that until eventually you reach the point where you get clarity on, all right, if I step out in this direction, I think I see a path. Now, the important thing to remember that I learned, whatever path you think you see, you need to see that path to step out. But whatever path that is, know that path is probably going to change. And that's okay, right? You may have, this is how I think it's going to unfold. And so I take 2 steps, and then I realize, oh, wow, that 3rd step I thought would be, that's not there. So I'm going to need to pivot. But just remember, Now that you've moved forward, you see other opportunities now. You see other things, right? And so the field has changed. Before you thought, all right, I have one opportunity. Now you've moved forward. And I've actually got six. All right, now I got right. So it isn't a one and done. It's a faith journey, I think, is how I like to talk about it. And that's really what goes into what I call living a story worth telling, right? It's that authentic faith that's driving you to keep moving forward and using what I call the superpower of perseverance, right? You just simply don't quit. All too many people just say it's too complicated. It's whatever. I'm just going to run out the clock on my life and be okay with that. And what I say to that is, no way. Don't run out the clock on your life. Your story is too valuable. It can help too many people. You get one chance to live it, and it's going to matter how you do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. We were a friend of mine. We were at a fundraiser last night it's the Special Forces Army Rangers, and these people are at the highest of levels in the Army Ranger. When they transition into a civilian life, it's not like he says that used to be they just wanted them to become security guards or something. Nothing wrong with that, but their skill levels, master's degree, they have been to leadership school. I mean, the resume looked like the who's who.
Yeah.
But I was talking to one of the gentlemen last night, and he had 3 kids in college. He's looking to make that transition after 30 years. And he said he went to the workshop the day before, and he had this anxiety. Here's a guy.
Yeah.
When you hear what they do, you're going like, my golly.
Yeah.
You have to adapt. You have to be thinking on your feet, all those kind of things times 100. But he said, I was stressed going into it, but then once I kind of got a better idea of the path, he wasn't as stressful. So we were talking, I said, time brings stress. If you have to do something tomorrow, it'll bring a lot of stress. But if you really know how to put it in proper perspective, which is kind of back what we talked about, is you don't always know what's around the corner, but you know what your skills are. You know what you're capable of doing. You don't want to let that worry just bury you. You want to just be able to keep moving forward and figure out things. So I want, you spoke about that person that is working in a job, got a secure income, but they have that dream and they have something inside them they want to pursue. What I run into a lot is people say, I don't have time. And I say, okay, I think it is your priorities will restrict you. So my partner's up in Canada. He's a book writer too. I mean, he's the one that encouraged me to do podcasting, but he sent me a book and I want to share it with our viewers before we go to how they can contact you and really get going. But I want to bring it up on our screen for our viewers. It's called here it is. I think I have it here. Yeah. Okay. Buy Back Your Time. He sent it to me 1 week ago. I went into Chat GPT, got the summary of it, got it on audio, got it on the book, of course. I went through it in a whole week and it changed everything about, I used to outsource, which everybody outsourced, but I never thought about it from a standpoint of always buying back time. And he told a story in the book about Oprah works 2 hours a day. And you're going, what? She's a billionaire. How do you only work 2 hours a day? And he laid out her day. Those 2 hours that she works is like maybe 7 years for somebody else because she has such a high level of activity during those 2 hours. She gets done so much more than anybody else. And that's why the value of her in the marketplace keeps going up. Same with Jeff Bezos, same with Elon Musk. They just manage their calendar differently, manage their life differently. So we have a couple outsourced people in the Philippines, And so they just started with me managing my calendar and my email, similar to what you do, because I was talking to Britt.
Sure.
I mean, I never even had communication with you
Right,
because
right, right.
it was, and I love that because when I saw that, it kind of reinforced that's exactly where I want to go.
Right,
I
right.
want to take 5 more hours because I work 16 hours, 15 hours a day, 6.5 days a week.
Sure,
I
sure,
love it, but
sure,
it's not sustainable. I mean, you
sure,
can't
sure,
work those kind of things.
sure.
Something's going to
Yeah,
happen.
right.
But my point is, for anybody that's interested, we're going to go in just a second because I promise. Just go. That you can go call me direct. You have to have been on my podcast in our community to take advantage of this because we want to support our community. But if you want to be a guest and you haven't been a guest, you can also be a guest.
Yeah.
So, all right, that's my commercial
Yeah.
break.
Well, hey, no, if I can just reinforce that. I mean,
Yes.
when I stepped out on my own, it was within 2 years, I brought on my first EA, first executive assistant,
Really?
at a time when I really probably couldn't afford it. At least I told myself that. But then I realized as Dan Martell, it's a great book. What I realized was that if I can pay somebody else, to know the value of your time, right?
Yes.
If you can pay somebody else less than that to do something, then that frees you up to go do other things. And so I've had numerous, Britt is the most recent one, but numerous really good assistants over the years. And they have positioned me to do what I do well, right? And I couldn't do it without them. So yeah, I wholeheartedly recommend that book and that whole thought process on there.
Yeah, well, thanks for that because I didn't know. I figured that Britt is taking those hours off your plate so you can work with your clients more, higher level. I mean, it just makes sense. But we think that we have to be good at returning emails. We think about we have to be managing our own calendar, but it's not. It's really a shift in our thinking.
It is.
So
it is.
I want you to really tell our viewers if they're interested in like really wrapping their business around stories, what would they need to do to get in touch with you and be able to have conversations?
Absolutely. Well, the easiest thing, if someone's like, hey, I've got a business or side hustle or whatever you have going on, big business, small business, I want to get clear on my brand story, for example, or hey, I've been thinking about writing a book. People have been telling me I should write a book. Or, hey, I have a book or I have ideas. I want to create a digital course or training and workshop. Like we work with everybody from Lewis Howes to John Maxwell to Michael Hyatt to all kinds of people out there. And the best thing to do is then just go to this link, mystorybuilders.com/story, right? mystorybuilders.com/story, and just schedule a time with one of our senior story strategists and just talk through your ideas. No obligation whatsoever. As always, if we can be of help to someone, we want to do that. And if not, we want to get out of their way so their story can keep moving, because that's what we're about is helping get stories out in the world that make the world a better place. So that's the easiest way to reach us is just go to mystorybuilders.com/story, book a time, talk with us, and see if we can be of help too.
That is awesome. And I want to encourage our viewers, you probably know some friends that are thinking about, they have an idea, they don't really know how to frame it, they don't know what to do with it, that maybe they're working a job and they have the steady income, but that's not their calling or their passion. So this is the time to really start asking questions, checking out things. So if you know somebody, share this video, share this podcast with them, allow them to understand that it's all about the story. And if you have that, you have the framework of really of being able to grow your company and grow whatever you're doing. So, Bill, what would you say? What would be the one thing that you would want our viewers to take home with them from this podcast? If you had to zero in it.
Absolutely. I think it is to do not underestimate the value of your story. Right? It feels normal to you. It feels like it doesn't have as much value because you have lived it from the inside out. But time and time again, I've seen work with people at a high level. I mean, I just talked to a gentleman today. He does keynotes at $50,000 a pop, does 100 of them a year. He tells stories of his experience and those kind of things. And certain people resonate with those stories and they really connect and they cause a light bulb to come on. And he hears from them all the time. I mean, you changed my life when you said that, and there are other people with whom he doesn't connect, and you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with not everyone's going to connect with my story, but my story has value to someone, maybe many someone's out there. You mentioned Oprah Winfrey, for example. There are some people that don't connect with her, but I don't think she's worried about those people. She's done just fine connecting with the other people, right? And it's okay.
Like, if there's one person that doesn't agree with you, hey, look.
There are plenty of people, plenty of stories. Learn to value your story and don't dismiss it, right? You have a unique story and message that you can bring to the world, and you can tell it in a unique way, and just don't underestimate it.
Wow, that was I call that in golf terms. I teed it up and you knocked it right down the middle, and it just crushed it down the middle, almost on the green, which you can't usually get on the green on par four. So that was good. That was awesome. And it's, that to have somebody that has your philosophy on a Friday afternoon where people are trying to wind down, come on. This is a time when you really want to embrace what you've had to share with our viewers. Thank you so much, Bill. We appreciate your time and sharing with our viewers.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, as Chick-fil-A would say.
Yes, exactly.
All right.